Amanda here, and I am so excited about today's video. I am going to be talking about and ranking the Universal monster movies. So let me be clear, because there are tons of Universal films. These are just the classic monster movies, so I will be talking about Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, The Mummy, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Invisible Man, and The Wolf Man. I am so excited for this video. A few things before we get started. I am ranking these solely on the basis of being horror movies, so some of them are less horror than others. That will play a role in what I'm ranking them out of 10. And also, oddly enough, it just started raining outside, even though it is 86 degrees. And it's very cloudy and there's thunder and lightning. So if you hear thunder, that is why. It's the perfect day to film this video. Also, I will say that some of these movies I definitely have more nostalgic feelings toward than others. Some of these I grew up watching. Some of these, this was the first time that I watched it. So that will play a role in how I feel about these films as well. If you guys have a different feeling than I do, it's totally cool. We all have our different ideas on what makes a horror movie a horror movie. These are just my ideas. I will also leave timestamps for all of them down below in case you want to skip around or just hear one film or whatever you guys want. I will be talking about them in the order of which I watched them this time, and I will just give a synopsis, what I liked about the film, my ranking, and then at the very end I will give you just a quick rundown of my least to favorite film. So let's just get started. I am very excited to talk about this. This will probably be a bit of a longer video, so let's just jump into it. The first film that I watched was Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love this film. This is a 1954 film. This one's just so fun. It's a group of scientists and they're in the Amazon and they find an arm, like a gill man arm. So they want to put together a team of expeditionists to go and find fossils. They think that it will help them understand the evolution of sea to animal creatures and in turn help man adapt to living on other planets, plus give them some money. So this film, the action just starts right away. The music is fantastic. A lot of these older films, especially the ones you'll see in like the 30s, they don't have a lot of music in the background, so this is definitely one of those films that does, and it's really awesome, that creepy, eerie, atmospheric music, and it's one of those movies where like you see the creature's hand creeping up slowly in the background and then you hear a woman scream. Ah! It's that type of film. There are awesome underwater shots. The entire monster swimming underwater with that suit on is just so impressive. It's a full body suit and a mask. So this team thinks that one of the rocks fell off and went into the lagoon, which is why they head into the lagoon to try to find, they're just looking for fossils. At this point, they don't know that there is actually a creature from the Black Lagoon that's lurking. There's also this underwater cliff that leads to caves, which is really fantastic. There's a weird scene where the creature from the Black Lagoon is like tickling a woman's feet while she's swimming in the water. A little creepy. But there's some up close scenes where the monster's just like his face underwater, and it's actually really creepy. They did such a good job, I think, with the suit, with everything. This is one of my favorite monsters just in general. I love Creature from the Black Lagoon. Oh, I should have worn my Creature from the Black Lagoon shirt. What was I thinking? That's okay. I'll wear it later on this month. But anyways, so do you hear that thunder? Oh my gosh, that's wild. There are two men on the boat. One man wants to kill the creature and one man doesn't. The one who wants to kill it actually shoots the creature and then starts the creature's revenge toward them. They find this underwater cave system and the set design is just awesome. The lagoon's really cool. The underwater cave is really cool. The underwater scenes are really cool. The eerie music is really amazing. It's also mixed with a lot of jungle noises and animal sounds, which I think just does a better job at making you feel like you're really there. So after this, the creature dams the lagoon so that they cannot leave after he gets shot. And what's creepy about this one, I think, is that the creature is intelligent enough to trap them. He's intelligent enough to try to seek revenge on them. So they're not just dealing with a mindless fish animal. There are a ton of underwater scenes. So if you don't like movies with little dialogue where there's just like long scenes of music, you might want to skip this one, but I think that it's really fun and effective, and it's really impressive how this movie, I think, was made. Also, one other thing is that when the creature from the Black Lagoon is out and he's walking around, they have him like gaping, his mouth's gaping like a fish, and his gills are kind of going crazy. I just think they did such a good job with that one. And this one I ranked an 8.5 out of 10. Love this film. The next one that I watched was The Mummy, and the 1932 version. By the way, I watched the first installment of each of these films beside the Wolfman. That one has an earlier version, but the Wolfman is the most popular one. It's the one that they have first on the list of movies. So that one, it's the one with Lon Chaney Jr. So that's why I did that one instead of the first one that they released. But all the other ones are the very first ones. Anyways, back to this one, The Mummy. I was so excited to watch this one because I have been craving some really good mummy content of just wrapped in cloth, trying to harm archaeologists. That's all I wanted. That's it. I didn't get it. So this one was much different than I expected. This is actually one that I had never seen before. And actually, if you have seen the Brendan Fraser The Mummy, that is actually a remake of the original of this one. So it has Imhotep, it has Oxunamun. Obviously, it's not the same, but it is credited on that IMDb page, so very interesting. I did not know that. So it's about a group that are on a field expedition and they find the Scroll of Thoth. They also find a mummy buried alive. So he's not alive then, but he had done something to piss people off enough to make them bury him alive. There's also a box buried with him that says, anybody who opens this, you're gonna not be around very long. So the man who opens it goes mad and ends up dying. It turns out that he read the scroll and resurrected the mummy. This is really the only mummy-ish type scene we get. We kind of get like a little movement from the mummy, and then you see his cloth trailing after him out the door, and that's about it. So when he returns, he is a person. He looks like a person, and he goes by the name Ardith Bey. Ardith Bey presents them with the location of the Princess Oxunamun under the guise that he says, and I quote, "We Egyptians are not permitted to dig up our ancient dead." So he tells them, we're not allowed to do it, but here I would love to have this in your museum. So they dig up Oxunamun, they put her in the museum, and we find that Oxunamun died and Imhotep tried to resurrect her, which is why he was buried alive and punished. So he tries to resurrect her in the museum, but it's weird because he resurrects her through the body of like the main guy, the main lead's love interest in the movie. It's not really outwardly stated why. I mean, they look alike, but I don't know if she's like an reincarnation of her. I don't know if she's a distant relative. I don't really know why this happens, but anyway, she kind of becomes possessed by the Oxunamun soul. The guy doesn't even know that he's resurrecting her. Like, he has to go and find the woman that her soul is going into. He ends up finding her, and it turns out that he must kill that girl so that Oxunamun can fully take over her body, and it's just one soul in there. Okay, that seemed confusing. I hope that made sense. What's really kind of creepy about this one is that the main guy, he falls in love with his love interest because he's the one that exhumed Oxunamun, and he fell in love with Oxunamun, a dead mummy lady, and then he sees this girl and he's like, wow, you look like this dead mummy that I exhumed and fell in love with. Now I'm in love with you. It's very odd, kind of creepy. Will he save her before it's too late? You have to watch the movie to find out. I don't want to ruin everything for you. But some set designs and shots are really cool in this movie, but it's much more of a story about Imhotep resurrecting his girlfriend than it is a mummy running around trying to chase people and harm them. So this one I gave a 6 out of 10. It was still fun and entertaining, but it definitely wasn't the mummy movie that I was looking for. So if you guys have good mummy recommendations, please leave them down below because I am in desperate need of a type of mummy. The next movie that I watched was 1931's Dracula. Alright, so this one, let's just, right off the bat, the set design, fantastic. The castle, so amazing. This movie is just, wonderful. There are also a lot of great one-liners in here. The dialogue from Dracula is just amazing. Him as a character, just fantastic. There's a man who must go to Count Dracula's castle at midnight. He's there to sign some documents so that Dracula can move, and his driver disappears while his carriage is coming up the drive. It's just such a fun opening scene for a movie. He just plays a short role in it, but it's very creepy. There are a lot of scenes that are filled with silence in this one. There's no music like there is with The Creature from the Black Lagoon. There's no soundtrack. There are, however, howls and footsteps and creaks and things like that, but there are a lot of just like silent scenes. I don't know, it's really effective in this movie, I think, just because of what it is. It's very atmospheric. Dracula is obviously played by Bela Lugosi, which I do believe was a bit of an occultist himself. So I really feel like he tapped into that to play Dracula, and wow, what a fantastic job he did. Oh, there are some amazing up-close scenes of Dracula with his eyes glowing. They do this a little bit in The Mummy too, but they are not as effective and not as creepy as this one. These scenes are one of my favorites. They are just so cool. Dracula ends up boarding a ship to England. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is once the boat has docked, there's a scene where you just see the shadow of the wheel and the captain slumped over it, and you hear a voice saying, "Captain dead, tied to the wheel." And it's, I don't know why, but it's just such a cool way of moving the plot along and telling you what happened without showing you. There's also a lot of really cool dialogue and quotes. So this one is from Dracula. He says, "To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious." And he also says, "There are far worse things waiting man than death." Oh, just so cool. I love this movie. Okay, there is no garlic in this film, but they do use wolf's breath, which is some sort of plant to like ward off vampires. There are stakes that are used, but no fangs. He does suck blood, he does hypnotize people with a stare, he doesn't have a reflection, and he does turn into a bat/a wolf. So it's just kind of interesting to see what things we associate with vampires that were and were not in the film. Then we have Professor Helsing, who thinks that they are dealing with the undead. So when Dracula lands, he makes his friend seem like he's mad to get into a madhouse to kind of like somehow get involved with the family. Professor Helsing does examine his accomplice and think that they are dealing with someone who is not living, and then he sees Dracula, he sees that he doesn't have a reflection, and he's like, "That's a vampire." And everyone's like, "No, it's not." And he's like, "Yeah, that's a vampire." And then it turns out it is. Professor Helsing also says, "The strength of the vampire is that people will not believe in him." And I thought that was a really cool, effective line. Then obviously the main girl gets bit by the vampire. They must find the coffin of Dracula and stake his heart to save her. Will they reach it in time? You watch the movie and find out. So this one also has not only Dracula, but his creepy wives that get up and do creepy shit too. There's also like a dead maid showing up, a possessed girl, the fog in this movie, everything. The castles are so cool. The crypts where they live, where their coffins are. This whole movie is fantastic. It's just like the best atmosphere I can think of a horror movie, and this one I have ranked 9 out of 10. Alright, next up we have Phantom of the Opera. This is a 1943 movie. However, this one is in Technicolor, so it was really cool to see it kind of come to life in that way. This one we have a violin player in the opera who is forced to retire because something is wrong with his hands. A lot of people think that he's stingy and he lives much below his means because he's worked at the opera house for like 20 years or something like that. But really it turns out that he has spent all of his money to try to train this girl named Christine, whom he believes in very much so. And so he tries to sell one of his concertos to play for Christine's sessions after he retires because nobody else has faith in her the way that he does. And I guess it's not only that, it's that people get paid a lot of money for their sessions to train. They want the money more than anything. So he takes his concerto to a publisher and he thinks that the publisher is actually trying to steal it. So he ends up killing the publisher, and the publisher's mistress throws acid on his face from like picture development, and that's why half of his face is burnt off in this specific version of Phantom of the Opera. So things start disappearing, and there's a guy who works there that says that there's a phantom who lives in the opera. They don't know that it's him yet, but they do find out eventually. So there are 2 men that are fighting over Christine. They produce a lot of comedy, like they're bickering back and forth to try to get her. There are some creepy scenes where you see like shadows or voices of the Phantom of the Opera and things like that. I don't know if I would call this necessarily a horror movie. The Phantom of the Opera makes the lead ill so that Christine can take over because she's the understudy. He ends up killing the lead and he demands that Christine sing. But now that they know that it's him, the police officer says, "No, we're not going to have her sing. We're going to lure him out by not putting her on stage." But he ends up, messing stuff up, and they end up playing his concerto to try to lure him out. And he ends up kidnapping Christine, and the 2 men go after her to try to figure out how to save her. This one is way more comical than the other films. In my head, it reminded me a lot of The Importance of Being Earnest, like that type of comedy. This one too, it had a larger cast than most of the other films do, but they all just kind of stand on stage and sing. They don't like move around or dance or anything like that. And a lot of opera is in it, but it is not in English, so it's just kind of a lot of singing in a language that I didn't understand. And that took up a big majority of the movie. So it's much more a movie about the opera itself than it is about, I mean, the Phantom is in it, but it's just not a scary movie, I wouldn't say. He also lives in like an underground sewer system with tunnels, which is a really cool scene. And even the set design of the theater is really cool as well. Oh, and the makeup of him is really cool. And I think my favorite part of this movie is these two guys are like obsessed with her, and they're like, pick one of us, and she just walks away from them and picks herself in her career, and I just thought, you go girl in the 30s. Anyways, okay, so this one I've ranked a 5 out of 10. Definitely not a horror movie, not exactly what I was expecting. Some creepy scenes, still a good movie, just I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a horror movie. The next one that I watched was The Wolfman. This is the 1941 version. Again, not the first movie that Universal released. I think the first one was called Werewolf in London, and it was in 35 or something like that. But this one came out later, and it stars Lon Chaney Jr. This one, Lon Chaney Jr., whose name is Larry, he goes to live with his father because he is going to take over the business. And his father puts up a telescope, and he's helping his father fix it, and his father's like, hey, find me later once you fix it. And he looks through, and he's creepily stalking this woman, and she owns an antique shop that's across the way. So he goes there and he starts flirting with her and being creepy. She gives him kind of the rundown on the urban legend in the town of werewolves because he finds a werewolf walking stick. And it turns out that werewolves see the pentagram marked in the palm of their next victim, and that's who they know how to go after. And I did not know that this was part of their lore. So that was really cool to hear. And he asks her to hang out. Him, her, and her friend all go to visit gypsies. So this one, there's a lot of creepy fog, a lot of outdoor scenes, and even the scenes of the fortune teller are pretty cool as well. Her friend goes to see the fortune tellers while they like go flirt in the woods. And the fortune teller turns out to be a werewolf, sees that she has the marking on her palm, and tells her, you gotta get out of her. But then just chases her and kills her anyway, so I don't know what the point of that was. But Larry tries to save her, beats this wolf, and then once he dies, he gets bit by the wolf as well. Once he dies, it turns into a man, so the whole town thinks that he has murdered a man. He's like, no, I'm a werewolf, that was a werewolf. Nobody believes him because they think it's more psychosis. And the ending is really sad in this one. It's really not like a perfect, everything tied in a beautiful bow, everyone's happy at the end. It's actually really sad. So this one is definitely a good horror movie, has good atmosphere, the werewolf suit, everything's really good. I really liked Lon Chaney Jr. in this one as well. Anyways, sad ending, 7 out of 10 for this guy. Next up, I watched Frankenstein, which is a 1931 film. This one has a warning in the intro, which I think was pretty common in films of this era, but still kind of just fun to see, like watch at your own risk kind of thing. This one stars Boris Karloff. Okay, so this one is about Henry Frankenstein, who is a student who has dropped out of college to try to do experiments of his own, and he believes that he can make a dead person living again if he has the right equipment. So him and his little sidekick Fritz go and rob graves. He sends Fritz to break into one of his old teacher's labs and to get a brain, but Fritz is a dumbass and he drops the healthy brain, or the normal brain. He ends up getting the criminal brain. That's what Frankenstein uses to resurrect this monster. This one, the set design of this, oh, the castle, the cemetery, the lab, the makeup in this, the lighting, the thunder, the wind, the machines, everything about this is just, oh, it's fantastic. I love this movie so much. This one I did grow up watching and is definitely the one that I've seen most of all, so I'm sure that that will play a role in my rating of this one. But his fiance and her father and his friend all come to visit him because he's supposed to get married and he's kind of gone MIA. They see that this monster is what he's creating. The monster ends up killing Fritz, and the doctor friend says like, hey, go get married. I'm gonna get rid of this monster and then I'll meet you out there. That doesn't end up happening because the monster ends up getting him first. So the whole town is celebrating. Everyone's excited that Henry Frankenstein has come and he is going to wed his beautiful wife. The thing about Frankenstein is, as much as it's a criminal brain and they try to blame him for everything that happens, he really only does harm people who are going to harm him first, or he harms people that he doesn't understand that he's harming. He like pushes people out of the way and he's rough with them. The guy's like 7 feet tall, but he doesn't really harm people on purpose. There's a scene where he's sitting with a little girl and they're throwing flowers into the water. This is after he has escaped, after he has murdered the doctor. And he runs out of flowers and he kind of starts to panic, and he picks up the little girl and he throws her in the water. He's obviously not trying to harm the girl. He's like, hey, I'm having fun throwing these flowers in. Oh, I'm out of flowers. Oh, I'll throw this in instead. She ends up drowning. Now, I think the most effective scene in this movie is the father of the little girl finds her and walks her through town. They're having a huge celebration, and then you see this man walking his lifeless daughter through town, and that celebration just turns to mayhem. And it is such a disturbing scene, and I remember watching this as a kid, and it has always, always stuck with me. I just think that this is one of the most effective scenes in a horror movie maybe ever. So after this, the town forms an angry mob to kill Frankenstein's monster. Henry is kind of in charge of it, and the thing that bothers me about this is, like, Henry is never condemned for his actions. He's seen as a hero. The monster ends up taking him to a windmill. The town ends up burning down the windmill. Now, in the movie, do they know that Henry is the reason that the monster is there? No, I guess not. Although some people do. But he's still never condemned for his actions, and it bothers me how the monster is seen as such an evil being. If you guys haven't seen it, I have a Frankenstein movie versus book where I talk about the plot of each, which are quite different, so I will leave that link down below if you guys want more Frankenstein-ish content. But this one I ranked a 10 out of 10. I grew up with this movie, I love this movie, I love everything about it, and for me it is a 10 out of 10. Now, the last movie that I watched was The Invisible Man. This is a 1933 film, and this one, along with Frankenstein, I have seen quite a bit. I love this movie. It is so good. I also have a movie versus book on this one. It is a story by H.G. Wells of the same name. I will leave that link down below if you guys are interested in hearing that. There's a man. He goes to a tavern, and he's completely covered head to toe, and he wants a room. He kind of pisses off the tavern workers. He's not very kind to them. He has anger issues. He yells and throws things, and so they end up calling the police on him. Let me tell you, the practical effects in this movie are fantastic, with his nose missing, the invisible part of him. This movie is so good for being a 1933 film. It just blows me away every single time I watch it. They call the police, and the police go to arrest him. However, he gets naked and runs away. So before that, he sets up a lab, and he's trying to make himself uninvisible. That's kind of the whole concept of the movie. This movie is quite comical, but not in the same way Phantom of the Opera is. It's kind of like watching a man's descent into madness comical, where he sings and skips down the street only wearing pants. Like that kind of funny, where it's like, oh, that's funny, but also really messed up because he's going a little nutty. His girlfriend, wife, fiance, I can't remember, but her and her father, who is the scientist that he works under, find out that he takes monocaine. I don't know if I wrote that correctly, but basically it's something that was injected in dogs that made them turn white, but it also makes them go mad. But the scientist has stated that he doesn't think that the Invisible Man knows that it makes him go mad, but it does, because he ends up going to his friend's house and getting his friend involved, and he's like, hey, we need to murder this man, we need to murder this man, we need to take over the world. So he has this like unquenchable thirst for domination. The reason I love this movie so much is like that mad scientist. I really love the dialogue and the subject matter of it. I think it's all just really, really awesome. I love that H.G. Wells story, so it's fun to see it come to life. The set is nothing special. It's not, you know, caves or giant castles or anything like that. It's like a tavern, a friend's house, but that's not really the big amazing parts of the movie. The amazing parts for me are like the plot, the dialogue. The movie goes on this whole thing where they show how difficult the hunt for an invisible man would be. I really enjoy these scenes as well. This, along with Phantom of the Opera and maybe the Frankenstein scene with the villagers, has the biggest cast, but this one has a lot more moving parts. Frankenstein, they're kind of dancing in the streets and stuff. At Phantom of the Opera, they're just standing there singing. But this one, there are cops running around looking for the Invisible Man. There are people running in the streets. There's a huge, huge cast, and they all have a different role in the movie. So this one is impressive just from like the cast standpoint. And my favorite part of this movie is when he turns visible again, because it kind of goes slowly. You see skull, and then you see veins and muscle and then skin. This one I rank a 9 out of 10. So really quickly, let me just tell you least favorite to most favorite. I did enjoy all of them, but least I would say horror to maybe most horror. In last place has got to be Phantom of the Opera with a 5 out of 10. Next we have The Mummy with a 6 out of 10. After that we have The Wolfman with a 7 out of 10. Then The Creature from the Black Lagoon with an 8.5 out of 10. In second place, that is tied with The Invisible Man, 9 out of 10, Dracula, 9 out of 10, and lastly, Frankenstein, my favorite, which is a 10 out of 10. Again, all of these are fantastic, and I was really surprised that Creature from the Black Lagoon came in fourth because I loved this movie. So, you know, take the ranking with a grain of salt, but go out and watch some Universal Monster movies if you guys haven't seen them already. I highly recommend them. They are so fun and definitely will get you in the mood for Halloween. Let me know what your favorite is, and I will see you tomorrow with another horror video. Bye, guys.